You know how it is, right? You get into a conversation about what's right or wrong, and before you know it, everyone's just shouting at each other. It really feels like we're more divided than ever. Well, in this explainer, we're going to build a kind of toolkit, something to help us have better, smarter conversations about all this stuff.
So why are these talks about morality so difficult? I mean, we all have these really strong gut feelings, but the second we try to explain why we feel that way, the whole thing just tends to fall apart. We end up just repeating our opinions over and over again, and we get absolutely nowhere.
And look, the stakes couldn't be higher. We're not talking about small stuff here. We're talking about massive, life-changing issues like abortion, animal rights, war, you name it. These are not just abstract ideas, you know? They have real, serious consequences for real people. That's exactly why we need a better way to talk about them.
Okay, so let's dive right in. We're going to be talking about something called moral philosophy, or just ethics. But don't worry, this is not some dusty old rule book that's going to tell you what to do. Think of it more like a practical guide, a way to sharpen our own thinking so we can build stronger arguments instead of just running in circles. So what is ethics really? Well, at its core, it's all about asking those really big questions, like what does it actually mean to live a good life? How do we even decide what's better or worse? And here's the biggest one of all. Is there really such a thing as an objective right and wrong that applies to everyone?
Now, it gets pretty interesting when you see how philosophers break this down. On one side, you have normative ethics, which is all about trying to figure out what is actually right or wrong in a situation. But then you have meta-ethics, which kind of takes a step back and asks questions about ethics itself, like what does the word good even mean in the first place? It's a little heady, I know. So for today, we're going to focus on some super practical tools that you can apply no matter what.
All right, if you remember just one thing from this entire explainer, please make it this next idea. This is, hands down, the most important distinction in all of ethics. And trust me, once you get it, you're going to start seeing it absolutely everywhere. It's the difference between facts and values.
And here it is. On one side, you've got descriptive claims. Just think of these as facts. They are statements about the way the world is. In theory, you could go out and test them, right? But on the other side, you've got normative claims. These are all about how the world ought to be. They're value judgments about what's good or what's bad.
This is such a great example to make it crystal clear. Let's take capital punishment. The descriptive claim is about the facts. Capital punishment acts as a deterrent. See, we can study that. We can look at the data. But the normative claim, capital punishment is justifiable, that's a moral judgment. You can't prove that with statistics. You have to back it up with moral reasons. Okay, so this whole distinction leads us to the single biggest trap that people fall into when they're arguing about ethics. It's called the is-ought problem, and it's a really subtle but super common logical mistake. The philosopher David Hume was one of the first to really nail this down, and it's the heart of the whole thing. Just because something is a certain way, that's a fact, it doesn't automatically mean it ought to be that way. You can't just make a leap from a fact to a value judgment without any other steps. And this mistake actually has a name. It's called the naturalistic fallacy. It's the classic error of assuming that whatever is natural must therefore be good. I mean, how many times have you heard someone defend some kind of behavior by saying, hey, it's only natural? Well, that's this exact fallacy in action. You see this come up a lot in fields like sociobiology. Scientists will look at our evolutionary past and they'll compare our behaviors to other social animals, like these chimps, to try and figure out why we do the things we do. They are describing what is.
But that brings up the million-dollar question, doesn't it? Even if we find some natural or evolutionary reason for a behavior, does that automatically make it morally good? Does the is of nature tell us what the ought of our morality should be?
David Hume used a really provocative example to illustrate this. He pointed out that, hey, incest is pretty natural in a lot of the animal kingdom, but almost every single human society on Earth condemns it. The point is so powerful. What we see happening in nature doesn't automatically write our moral rulebook. We still have to make a value judgment.
So, after all that, what have we learned? Well, we've just put together a pretty powerful toolkit for thinking more clearly about ethics and for having way more productive conversations. So let's lay it all out.
Here it is, your 3-step ethical toolkit. First, always go beyond just stating your opinion. Give reasons for your claims. Second, pull apart the facts, the is, from the values, the ought. And third, always watch out for that is-ought trap. Just because something is natural does not make it right.
You know, in the end, studying ethics isn't about finding some magical answer key that solves every single moral problem. It's about learning how to ask better, sharper, more precise questions. It gives us the tools to understand our own values and the values of others with a lot more clarity and a lot less confusion.
So I'll leave you with this one last thought to chew on. Think about your own life, your own beliefs. What is one fact, one is, that you've been treating as a moral rule, as an ought, maybe without even realizing it? The answer might just surprise you.